We'll be ready here in just a moment. Welcome to VidZette, your home for careful consideration of our common concerns. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Tonight, I'm going to begin with several little news items. Our favorite figure, Hillary Clinton, managed to make the news again this week, but it wasn't a big deal. She got in a little fender bender with the Scooby van in a parking garage. Oh my goodness. Such a big deal. And then we actually had video of her walking. Oh, she can still walk. Yeah, I had at least two people send this to me. It was up on other news feeds. And the answer is sorry, there's nothing there. It's just nothing that tells us anything we haven't known since I did Hillary's 9 lives with her back brace. The second one that's been all over the news is Jamal Khashoggi. Now, this is a Saudi national who was uptight with the royal family, and he was a reporter for the New York Times, or at least they called him that. He did publish some columns and so on. Who entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey, and has not been seen since. Now, there's all kinds of stories out there, mostly started by the Turkish government, saying that he was killed inside the consulate, dismembered, and hauled away in little pieces. The one careful thing we have to do here is wait a minute. How many times do governments tell us things that aren't true? Nah, never happens. So we actually don't know anything about what happened to him. All we know is he hasn't been seen since. Now, there are some curious bits about this. He has an American green card. That makes him a permanent resident of the United States. And if he, in fact, was murdered, that makes it a federal felony, and we have the right to go kidnap the people who did it and bring them back for trial. That's already been tried in federal court, and well, we'll see what happens. The president has said there are going to be big consequences, but he's not going to move until we have something a little more certain. And since governments never lie to us about what's happened, we should believe everything that the Turkish government says. One news item that really hasn't made much of an impact, and it's largely because Khashoggi is so sensational. And oh, by the way, one person dead. The liberals really didn't care about the fact that we had 4 Americans in Iranian prisons when we had Barack Obama making the Iran deal. They made nothing about the 4 Americans who died in Benghazi. Yeah, cry me some more crocodile tears. Back to the story that didn't make a lot of splash, leaking. Oh, leaks just go drip, drip, don't they? They don't splash. Last week, a fellow named James Wolfe, who was a staffer for the Senate Intelligence Committee, got rung up for leaking. But he was a Democrat, so it didn't really make much news. Within the last couple of days, we have another person, also a Democrat, named Natalie Mayflower Sowers Edwards. What a name. 40 years old. She is a senior advisor to the Treasury Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. Now, that's big stuff. This lady has all sorts of power and pull, and she got caught with a thumb drive in her possession, including all sorts of confidential financial information that should never make it public. She had been giving that to the New York Times. So now we know another leaker. So we had reality winner down in Florida. what a winner, got nailed. We have Edward Wolf gets nailed, and now we have Edwards getting nailed. So it's starting to happen. Jeff Sessions did say that he had 20 odd leak investigations underway. Looks like some of them are real. And remember what we said about this. The Democrats do all kinds of things because they feel like they can get away with them. When you start ringing these people up and locking them up, all of a sudden people aren't going to be so interested in leaking. They've lived in a town where leaking was a way of life. All of a sudden, it's not so smart. At any rate, then the final fun piece of news was about Pocahontas. Or should we call her Liawatha? Elizabeth Warren, who made this great claim that she had an Indian, a Cherokee Indian ancestor. Now, why would she make such a claim? And she's been making this claim since about 1980. For example, in 1984, she contributed so called Cherokee recipes handed down through the family to a book called Pow Wow Chow. I'm sorry, you couldn't make up that name. It was obviously Indian recipes, but we now know that in fact those recipes were cribbed word for word from an article written by, and where is it here? A French chef named Pierre Franey. Word for word. Oh, yeah. When did the Cherokees get to be French? So calling her Liawatha is a good name and really is appropriate. But let's look at some of the other things. It turns out from her test that she's probably 1 in 1,024 parts Native American. The typical American is 1 in 512. In other words, she's got half as much Indian blood as the typical American. And the Cherokee Nation has basically told her to go pound sand. That's not how you identify someone. And then just to make life interesting, I mean, there's so much in this that she claimed, oh, I never used it for anything. Yeah, you were on the Harvard uh, school, university faculty list as a minority, a Native American. This was to help them. It was to help you. Yeah, lady, you calling you Liawatha is the right name. But the fun part of this is that supposedly the husband of this Cherokee Indian ancestor, let's go back and look at it. She says it's this particular one. The husband of that one we now know served in the Tennessee militia escorting Cherokee Indians out of the Southeast in the Trail of Tears. It really seems highly unlikely that her great, 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 however many times great grandmother was a Cherokee. The woman is a fraud. But that brings us to the point of why they do this. And remember, the key point of our talk tonight is who is the true leader of the Democrat Party and why did it take us so long to figure it out? Elizabeth Warren wanted to be known as a minority because that way she could play the minority card to get more votes. Now, we have all known that the way you know a politician is lying is that his lips are moving. That's been the way it is forever. And we elect people in the hopes that they'll do something good. And what do? They get co opted, they play the game, and they never do anything. When was the last time, for example, the budget actually got cut? Can you spell never? So what do? Republican guys will get out and they'll say it's time for us to cut the budget. Why? They want us to think that they're budget cutters. They want their base to believe in them. Why? They know what the base believes. So I'm going to present myself as one of you. Who's leading this parade? The base. Let's go on the Democrat side. What do you have? You have the people in the street. The Democrats want to pander to their base. Elizabeth Warren wants to be known as a Cherokee Indian. We can go on and look at all of these others. You want someone to be a champion of women. So we're going to support a woman's right to choose without anybody realizing that half of those babies that got aborted were women. That's supporting women. We can go on and on. The left base, as we talked about last week, is very, very uncritical in the way it thinks about things. It grew up with no standards. It didn't develop a good vocabulary, and it didn't develop a BS detector. So anybody who says anything that sounds good, like, oh, yeah, this is sweeter, this is nicer. Oh, I have a friend who's a undocumented immigrant. No, she's an illegal alien, but she's such a nice girl. We should let all of those others in. And so you have a complete lack of critical thinking. And so what happens is the Democrats now are going, okay, here's where the lack of critical thinking is going. Here's where the energy is. I want to tap that energy. It's not that I believe in it, it's I want to tap it. And so if you look at the way Democrat leaders have switched harder and harder and harder left, there might be one Democrat leader who actually was there to begin with. That's Bernie Sanders. And all the way along, he said, I'm a socialist. This is what I believe in. And because he actually stood up and said, this is what I believe in, this is what I want to do, he got support. And frankly, had it not been for the establishment being just plain unethical, he probably would have won the nomination. Let's take just a pause for a moment here. Oh, Natalie's boss and the treasurer is also implicated. Somebody's got a little more information than I had. Very good. Thank you for the pickup on that. And yes, we knew she had a lot of documents on the thumb drive. And good thing that Liawatha didn't claim to be Asian applying to Harvard. There is a lawsuit right now in federal court about Harvard discriminating against Asian students in their admissions policy that's supposedly race neutral. Is my audio sounding very strange? Well, I'm trying to do it with the best audio I've got. Let me take a moment and look at my settings. Stand by, everybody. Well, it doesn't look like I can change anything. Whatever I've got, I've got. So we'll just have to live with it for now. It could be that the wrong microphone is picking up the discussion. In any case, let's go back to what we saw. We saw people pandering to their base, and this is typical in the primaries. You're always going to pander to the base. You can't win your primary without pandering to your base. And then as soon as you win your primary, you pivot. So you're putting on this face, and as soon as you win the primary, you put on that face. That's called being two-faced. Or as the Cherokees would say, white men speak with forked tongue. The problem you've got now is you have a person who said this, but now is saying that. What do you believe? And the answer is you don't believe anything because you know their lips are moving. And we've watched this again and again and again, but we didn't tumble to the fact, even though the commentators were saying it again and again, that so and so can't win unless he takes a hardline position with his base, but then he has to pivot. And the idea was, guys, I'm really with you, but I have to say it differently out here so that they'll not vote against me. When in fact, the real way is something that somebody we've recently come to know by the name of Donald Trump showed. And this is how we know who the leaders of the parties are. Donald Trump simply came out front and said, here it is. Here's where I want to go. Build the wall. Our trade deals are stinko. I'm going to make America great again. We're going to cut taxes, run the list. We're going to cut regulations. What did he do? Early days in his presidency, he signed an executive order that every agency had to cut 2 regulations for every new one. Now, that's largely symbolic, but the actual numbers are more like 20 to 1. We are getting rid of regulation. You can run a business without having half of your employees involved with government regulations. Tax cuts brought jobs back to America. Those 2 things work. And see, he stood up and said, here's where I am. This is what I stand for. And when he goes out to the rally in Montana tonight, what is he going to say? Promises made, promises kept. Every time. Promises made, promises kept. Here's my face. Here's my comb over. My comb over doesn't change. Yes, that's real hair. And here's who I am. And I'm working 20 hours a day for you because that's what I do. You see, Donald Trump actually stands for something. Now, I have to admit straight up, I voted for him because I thought Hillary was so awful. No question. I kind of was holding my breath to see what we would get. And in almost everything, he's done exceedingly well. The one thing he's done totally stupid is a drug war. That we'll talk about that another time. But what he did was he came out and he stood for things. And by standing for things, what did he do? He made enemies of a whole bunch of rhinos. Remember, rhino stands for Republican in name only, also known as never Trumpers. Why? Rhinos wanted to hold down a chair in the Senate or hold down a chair in the House. They had no interest in anything else. They simply wanted to be there in the halls of power. It feels so good. Somebody has to come to me to get my vote for whatever. I am important. And that is a narcotic and it is addictive. Donald Trump said, I want to make America great again. The country I love is being destroyed. When Barack Obama said fundamental change, he meant it. But his fundamental change was fundamental destruction. Basically, most of us can see things without seeing them. Donald Trump made it so clear that what's been going on is politicians show you one face, turn around and show another face to somebody else. That's why Hillary made the deplorables comment in private. That's why a whole lot of other people did things in private. For example, my current Congresswoman, Stephanie Murphy, held a get together tonight where she said there will be no news media, no recording devices, no nothing. It was to the Chamber of Commerce of all things. No recordings. So who knows what she said in private so she wouldn't have to say them in public. Any politician who has to do that needs to be out because we need to know what they are thinking and what they're doing. We cannot have politicians who lie to our faces and tell us it's the truth. They can't take us out in a rainstorm and tell us the sun is shining. We've got to stop that. And Trump is emboldening a number of people to do that. The nice part is that we saw with the Kavanaugh circus that this is news for everybody, and the Republicans and the undecideds in the middle are waking up. We actually have people who stand on principle. Let's take a break for a moment and let's see what we've got over here. Yes, if the Democrats take the House, nothing else will get done. It will be really sad. Yes, actually, something will get done. We will continue to see regulatory reform, and we will continue to see judges confirmed. And if Trump is smart, he will let the government shut down, and most people will discover that they don't even notice when it's not there. Okay. Tuho brings up about 4,000 El Salvadorans marching to our border. Notice what the president did. He said, "We know about this. And by the way, Guatemala, El Salvador, you let this go on, no more money from us. And oh, by the way, Mexico, same story. Shut them down. Don't let them in." And the president has something that he can use that would be very, very effective if the Mexicans give you trouble and we end up with these people coming to the border. First of all, this is an invasion, and so he can indeed put the army on the border and just shut it down cold. If you're going to come across, you come across in the designated places. If you don't have the right papers, you don't come in, period. But there's one other thing he can do, and Mexico will get religion very, very quickly. Remember, Mexico's biggest trading partner is the United States. They make a bunch of stuff that we use. What would happen? Just think about this. Suppose you are a truck driver and you come to the border with the United States through the proper line, and your truck gets pulled off to the side, and the inspectors go through every box on your truck to make sure there's no contraband and no wetbacks. How long would that take for your truck? Hours? Days? What about the other 2,000 trucks that are stuck behind you and they're going to do the same thing to those trucks? I think the president of Mexico would get religion real quick. And it wouldn't surprise me if the president or if President Trump simply led an instruction to a single border crossing to do a detailed enforcement like that for 24 hours, just 24 hours, and then tell the president of Mexico, we're going to do that everywhere if you don't shut down those people coming through. You already have laws that don't let them come in. So use them. You turn him back. I don't need this trouble. You don't think he'd do it? I think he might very well do it. And here he is. He's just inspecting for contraband. He's not doing anything to those people. Oh, they didn't show up at the border? Surprise. Oh, my goodness. Some news here. Early voting in North Carolina, huge turnout. Not a good sign for the filthy Dems. Okay. I have to ask Day One Minecraft, uh, do you have any data on which party is showing up more than the other? Because even though you won't be able to get the vote, you'll be able to get more Democrats, more Republicans. You get numbers on that. Okay, and Tuho says Trump turned macroeconomics on its head. I was taught in economics class in college that are bad, but the strength of the U.S. economy can force deals with trading partners. Okay, let's talk about tariffs for just a moment. Tariffs are bad. The Smoot-Hawley Act proved that tariffs are bad if you just use tariffs as tariffs. And so you were taught correctly in college. The problem here is that simplistic view is not looking at how Donald Trump is using tariffs. Donald Trump is using those tariffs as a negotiating tool. And by getting the new version of NAFTA down, a lot of the tariffs go away or never actually get implemented. It's a pretty simple deal. Now, is that new version of NAFTA perfect? No, but it's better than what we had. And remember that when you negotiate a deal, ultimately you may not get everything. I may want that pizza for $2 and Domino's will come down to 5 or whatever. We have to meet in the middle. Or if you watch American Pickers, you'll see them dicker on a price. And sometimes they'll get the price, sometimes they won't. Same thing with the new NAFTA. You don't get everything you want, but as long as you get more, you end up making it worthwhile. And it was definitely worthwhile. The tariffs used to twist arms did their job and went away. Same thing can happen with China. It really depends on when China decides to blink. Their economy isn't nearly as strong as many would like us to think. Okay. Okay. I would notice the government shut down as a nurse at the VA, along with many others. Um, Remember that the working people ultimately all got paid. They all got their back pay for not working. If you didn't at the VA, you're the exception. But here's the thing: during a government shutdown, we have all of the quote non essential workers are furloughed, and we simply never notice that they're not there. What happens? The military still gets paid, Social Security still goes out. I mean, there's a whole pot full of stuff that still goes out. We only actually lose about a third, maybe, of the government when it's all done. And frankly, most of that third, I would say the Department of Education should go away. Department of Energy, other than the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, should go away. That's two to start with. Department of the Interior has some work, but most of it is probably not necessary. Um, I don't have all of those cabinet agencies in front, so I'm just trying to pull a list off the top of my head. But there are huge amounts of the federal government that simply should not exist. And another thing he can do is simply have a hiring freeze. Remember that the largest cost of any enterprise is employee salaries, and this would start cutting things right away. His idea of a 5% cut, certainly you can cut that. He should have said 15%, and that would have gotten people's attention. Okay, so you're the so-called redneck, you're probably up in the hillside hills of what's good. I hope we have a huge red tsunami. I really believe that it's coming. The Senate looks absolutely solid for the Republicans because of all the stuff out of the Kavanaugh bit, where everybody has seen how evil the Democrats are. And I use that word carefully. They are evil. They have sold their soul to the devil and they want nothing more than power. They cannot handle the idea that you can live without them. The actual number on regulation cuts 22 for every new one. That's good. And I see a prediction of 3 seats pickup in the Senate. Uh, what do we have? 10 seats that are potential pickups. I'd be surprised if it's as small as 3 seats. I think that we're probably going to hold in. Dean Heller's going to hold. That was an embattled one. I just heard information today that Rick Scott is 2 points ahead of Bill Nelson here in Florida. That's going to be a pickup in a state that was razor's edge. And I live in the I-4 corridor, which is the swing part of Florida. It looks very good for Rick Scott to knock off Bill Nelson. Yeah. By the way, Rick is campaigning on the idea that Bill Nelson is an empty suit. And that's basically what he is. Year after year, he's there, but you never hear anything. And we have somebody who was put in Twitter jail. I was shadow banned. Yep. And Dick Morris is probably right that the only way the Dems will move to the center is to have a major loss this midterm election. But if you look at the fallout from Hillary's loss, they didn't understand. One of the big things that goes on with the left, and remember who the leaders of the left are. They're the angry, loud voices in the street who not only have no good use of language, they have no historical basis, their BS detector is a piece of crap. Those people get louder and louder. And if something were to change, they get really louder and they'll reject the Democrats there are. The Democrats are on a one-way street. There's nothing they can do for the time being. They can't go to the middle because they'd lose their base. And because they have no center, they are in trouble. I mean, Andrew Gillum, who is the Democrats' candidate for governor here in Florida, looks like he's going to lose to Rick DeSantis because he wants Medicare for all. He wants to establish a state income tax. We don't have one. And a whole bunch of other things. And that message is starting to get through. So, you know, the lefties are just going further left. And I don't think that they have the capability of self-reflection. In the party after the general election, when the campaign staff of Trump and Clinton got together up at Harvard, they kind of had a postmortem and a party. And the guys on the left spent their time screaming about fake news on the right. What were they talking about? Two things: emails and Parkinson's disease. And I got named almost by name in their yelling and screaming. They have no insight into the idea that they had a terrible candidate who was also ill. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, if you have to wait for a paycheck, it hurts a little bit. Most of us should be taking the time to be putting money away to handle problems. Let's say somebody gets sick in the family, you have to take time off, whatever. You really need to plan for a rainy day, and all of us need to do that. But if you're just barely getting by, that's tough. I'll tell you one thing. My daughter, who is not making a whole lot of money right now, on Facebook was commenting to one of her friends that what the friend needed to do was to start salting money away every day in savings and an IRA. And so if Natalie's doing that on a very thin income, anybody can do it. And as the clock runs out, a couple of things. I know how you feel living paycheck to paycheck. Yes, that happens. I've been very fortunate not to have to do that for a long time. My profession was well paid, and I had money set aside. Trump economy has helped me with lower taxes. Remember, Pelosi wants the crumbs back. And as long as we remember James Carville's comment, it's the economy, stupid, we win. I don't think the government shutdowns accomplished anything in the end. They haven't in the past. But we haven't had Donald Trump on the top when one of them comes through. It has been a wonderful adventure to watch him so far. And I think we're going to see something very interesting if a shutdown does come along. And be prepared to be pleasantly surprised. All right. Well, the clock has taken us up. I am really appreciative of all of you who come in and comment and the people who watch afterwards. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us at Twitter. We keep all of that stuff there at VidZette on Twitter. And I used to try to keep a Facebook page up. It just didn't, a regular web page up. It just doesn't work. I'm doing everything through Facebook now until they decide to can me, and then we'll figure something else out. So until next time, thanks for watching. I'm Dr. Ted Noel.